The sky above the Velrani homeworld burned orange and red. Smoke rose from 100 fires across the once beautiful city. The Temple of Ancestors, which had stood for 10,000 years, now had cracks running through its white stone walls. Bodies lay in the streets. The air smelled of death and burning metal. Kiraveth stood on the temple steps and watched her world die. She was tall like all her people. Her skin glowed soft blue in the fading light. Her eyes, large and silver, had seen too much horror in the past 7 days. In her 4-fingered hands, she held the spear of her ancestors. It had been passed down through 40 generations. Her mother had carried it, her grandmother before that. Now, Kiraveth carried it, and she knew she would be the last. Below her, the Drakari war machines moved through the city like metal insects. They walked on 6 legs, each one ending in a point that crushed stone and bone alike. Their bodies were part machine, part living flesh. They did not speak. They did not negotiate. They only consumed. The Drakari had come to 1,000 worlds before this one. They ate civilizations the way fire ate dry wood. When they finished with a world, nothing remained but ash and silence. The Velrani had never been warriors. They were artists and philosophers. They built beautiful things and thought deep thoughts about the nature of existence. They had no armies because they had never needed them. Their world had no predators. Violence was something they read about in old stories, not something they practiced. Now, they were paying the price for their peaceful nature. Kiraveth watched another group of her warriors charge at a Drakari walker. They carried spears like hers, weapons designed for ceremony and honor duels between willing participants. The spears bounced off the walker's armor like sticks against stone. The walker's weapons fired, and the warriors fell. She had sent a message to the Galactic Concord 3 days ago. The Concord was supposed to protect member worlds. They had ships and soldiers and weapons that could fight the Drakari, but the response had been cold and bureaucratic. Your world has been deemed strategically insignificant. Resources cannot be allocated at this time. We express our condolences for your situation. Strategically insignificant. Her people were dying, and some council far away had decided they were not worth saving. A plasma bolt screamed toward a young Velrani child running across the plaza below. Without thinking, Kiraveth leaped down and swung her spear, deflecting the bolt away from the child. The impact sent pain shooting up her arms. She heard a crack. She looked down at her spear. A deep fracture ran through the ancient wood. The spear that had protected her family for generations was broken. The child ran to safety. Kiraveth stood alone in the plaza as 3 Drakari soldiers approached. They were humanoid, covered in black armor that seemed to grow from their skin. Their faces had no expressions. Their eyes glowed red. This is the end, she thought. We will become another forgotten name, another dead world that no one remembers. She raised her broken spear anyway. If she was going to die, she would die fighting. Then the sky screamed. Something came through the clouds faster than anything Kiraveth had ever seen. It was a ship, but not like any ship in Concord records. It was angular and aggressive, covered in black marks from weapons fire and atmospheric entry. On its nose, someone had painted white teeth in a savage grin. The ship did not slow down. It hit the largest Drakari command walker directly, moving at impossible speed. The explosion lit up the entire city. The shockwave knocked Kiraveth off her feet. When she rose, the walker was gone, replaced by a crater of burning metal and flesh. The 3 Drakari soldiers turned toward the crash site. They forgot about Kiraveth. Something had their attention now, something they had not expected. From the fire and smoke, a figure emerged. It was smaller than Kiraveth had expected, much smaller. It stood on 2 legs, with 2 arms, covered in some kind of flexible armor. It had no natural weapons that she could see. No claws, no fangs. Its skin was soft and tan. Its eyes were small, and a strange color like the brown of tree bark. But those eyes, there was something in them that made Kiraveth's heart beat faster. Something she had never seen in any being before. The creature smiled. It showed its teeth. There were too many of them. It raised a weapon she did not recognize, and fired at the first Drakari soldier. The sound was thunder. The soldier's chest exploded. Before the body hit the ground, the creature had already killed the second one. The third tried to run. It did not get far. The creature walked toward Kiraveth through the smoke and fire. It moved with a confidence that seemed almost insane given the circumstances. Thousands of Drakari filled the city. Their warships filled the sky. And this small being walked like it owned the world. It stopped in front of her. Up close, she could see burns and cuts on its face. Blood ran from a wound on its arm. It was clearly injured, but it did not seem to care. "Name's Captain Nate Dawson," it said. The translator implant in Kiraveth's ear turned the strange sounds into words she could understand. United Earth Navy. Well, former Navy. It's complicated. Kiraveth stared at him. "What are you?" "Human." He looked around at the burning city, at the advancing Drakari, at the bodies in the streets. His smile faded, replaced by something harder, something cold. "Heard your distress call 3 days ago. Came as fast as I could." The Concorde said no one would come. "Yeah, well," he checked his weapon and loaded fresh ammunition. "I'm not the Concorde. I don't much care what they think is strategically significant." He looked at her with those small, strange eyes. "You people are dying. That's significant enough for me." Kiraveth did not understand. He had come alone. He had crashed his ship into a Drakari walker. He was injured and outnumbered, and far from home, with no backup and no hope of survival. Why would anyone do that? "You will die here," she said. "Maybe." He shrugged like she had commented on the weather. "Probably, but I'll take a lot of them with me first." He nodded toward her broken spear. "That thing's not going to do you much good. Stay behind me. We're going to find survivors and figure out a plan." Against the entire Drakari invasion force? The human smiled again. That strange, toothy, terrifying smile. "I've had worse odds. Come on, let's go save your world." He started walking toward the sounds of battle. After a moment, Kiraveth followed. She did not know why. Perhaps because he was her only hope. Perhaps because she wanted to understand how anyone could face certain death with a smile. Behind them, the Drakari were regrouping. They would attack again soon. The odds were impossible. The situation was hopeless. But for the first time in 7 days, Kiraveth felt something she had thought was dead. Kiraveth had studied xenobiology when she was young. She remembered reading about humans in a dusty textbook. The entry had been short and dismissive. Humans were a Class 12 Deathworld species. Their homeworld, Earth, was a nightmare place. The gravity was crushing. The temperature swung from freezing cold to burning hot, depending on location and season. The planet was covered in predators, poisons, diseases, and natural disasters. Earthquakes, volcanoes, massive storms that could level cities. According to the textbook, humans were unremarkable. They had no natural weapons, no armor, no special abilities. They could not see in the dark. They could not regenerate lost limbs. They could not survive in vacuum or breathe underwater. Their lifespans were short, barely 100 years at best. The Galactic Concorde had rejected their application for membership. They were classified as too aggressive and potentially destabilizing. Most species in the galaxy ignored them. Kiraveth was beginning to understand that the textbook had been very, very wrong. She followed Nate through the ruined streets of her city. They had been moving for 3 hours now, gathering survivors as they went. There were 47 Velrani behind them now, including 12 children and 8 wounded who could barely walk. It was not an army. It was a group of refugees. But Nate moved like they were an army. He checked corners before crossing streets. He listened for sounds she could not hear. He seemed to know where the Drakari were before they appeared. And when they did appear, he killed them. Kiraveth watched him fight a group of 5 Drakari soldiers at close range. His weapon ran out of ammunition, so he used it as a club. When it broke, he picked up a piece of metal pipe from the street. He moved faster than she thought possible, for a being without enhanced reflexes. He hit harder than she thought possible, for a being without enhanced strength. One of the soldiers grabbed him and threw him into a wall. The impact cracked the stone. Kiraveth heard bones break. She was certain he was dead. Nate stood up. Blood ran from his nose and mouth. His left arm hung at a bad angle. Something was wrong with his ribs. He should not have been able to breathe, let alone fight. He smiled. "That all you got?" he said to the Drakari soldiers. Then he killed all 5 of them, with his broken arm hanging useless at his side. Afterward, he sat down against a wall, while the survivors gathered around him. One of the Velrani, an elder named Vethkai, who had been a healer before the invasion, examined his injuries. "Your arm is fractured in 2 places," Vethkai said. "You have 3 broken ribs. One of them has punctured your lung. You should be unconscious from pain. You should be dying." Nate nodded. "Yeah, that sounds about right." He looked at his arm. "Can you set it?" Vethkai stared at him with wide silver eyes. "Did you not hear me? Your lung is punctured. You need surgery. You need time to heal. You need— What I need is to keep moving." Nate's voice was calm. "The Drakari are going to find us if we stay here. More of your people are out there, waiting to be rescued. I can rest when we're safe. Right now, I need you to set my arm so I can keep fighting. But the pain? Pain is just information." Nate looked at Kiraveth. "Where I come from, we learned a long time ago that pain doesn't have to stop you. It's just your body's way of telling you something is wrong. I already know something is wrong. I don't need the reminder." Vethkai set his arm. Nate did not scream. He did not even close his eyes. He watched the process with the same calm expression he might have worn while eating a meal. When it was done, he stood up. His face was pale. Sweat covered his skin. But he picked up a weapon from one of the dead Drakari and checked its ammunition. "Let's keep moving," he said. Kiraveth walked beside him as they continued through the city. She had to know. She had to understand. "Why?" she asked. "Why what? Why do you do this? Why did you come here? Your species has no connection to us. Our world has nothing you need. The Concord told you to stay away. Why would you risk your life, suffer this much pain, for strangers?" Nate was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than before. "A long time ago, my species almost destroyed itself. We had wars that killed millions. We had weapons that could end all life on our planet. We came close to extinction more than once." He stepped over a piece of rubble. "But we survived, not because we were strong or smart. We survived because when things got bad enough, we learned to help each other. Strangers helping strangers, people risking their lives for people they would never meet." He looked at her with those small brown eyes. "That's what humans do, Kiraveth. We help. Not because we have to. Not because we get something out of it. We help because it's the right thing to do. Because the universe is dark and cold and full of things that want to hurt people, and the only way to fight that is to be the light." "But you are one person against an army." "Yeah," he smiled, "but I'm a really stubborn person. And where I come from, we have a saying, it's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog." Kiraveth did not understand the reference, but she understood the meaning. They found more survivors as the day went on. By nightfall, they had over 100 Velrani following them. Nate led them to the old mining tunnels beneath the city, where the Drakari scanners could not find them. As the survivors settled in for their first safe rest in days, Kiravet sat with Nate near the tunnel entrance. His breathing was labored. His wounds were worse. He should have been resting, but he insisted on keeping watch. "You are dying," she said quietly. "Probably," he agreed. "But not today. And not tomorrow. I've got work to do." "How do you do it? How do you keep going when your body is failing?" she asked. He thought about it for a moment. "Spite, mostly," he grinned. "The universe keeps telling me I can't do things. I keep proving it wrong. It's kind of a hobby." Despite everything, Kiravet laughed. It was the first time she had laughed in weeks. "You are insane," she said. "Oh, absolutely," he nodded seriously. "All humans are. You have to be a little crazy to evolve on a planet that's constantly trying to kill you. It does something to your brain." He looked out at the burning city above them. "The Drakari think they know what they're dealing with. They've conquered 100 worlds. They think we're just another species to crush." His eyes hardened. "They have no idea what's coming." "What is coming?" Nate's smile became something colder, something dangerous. "Me," he said, "and hopefully a lot more like me." As if in answer, his communicator crackled with static. A voice came through, human words that his translator rendered into Velrani speech. "Nate, you idiot, are you still alive down there?" For the first time since she had met him, Kiravet saw Nate's face light up with genuine joy. "Hannah," he said, "about time. What took you so long?" "Traffic was bad. Now stop dying and tell me where to land. I brought presents." Hope was no longer just a flicker. Hannah Cole landed her dropship in the tunnels 2 hours before dawn. She was shorter than Nate, with hair the color of flames, and a vocabulary that made the translator implants struggle to find appropriate words. She stepped out of the ship and immediately punched Nate in his injured shoulder. "That's for going alone," she said. "Ow. And this," she pulled a medical kit from her belt and threw it at him, "is because you look like death warmed over. Sit down before you fall down." Nate caught the kit and grinned. "Missed you too, Hannah." Kiravet watched the exchange with fascination. Humans showed affection in strange ways. Hannah had brought more than medical supplies. The dropship was loaded with weapons, food, communication equipment, and something she called the good stuff. Kiravet did not know what the good stuff was, but it made Nate very happy. "How did you get all this?" Nate asked, as volunteers unloaded the ship. "I borrowed it." "From whom?" "The colony on Kepler 7. They were not using it." Hannah smiled sweetly. "I left a note." Over the next few days, everything changed. Hannah set up communications with human space. Within hours, messages started coming in. Dozens of humans had heard about Nate's mission. They were angry that the Concord had refused to help. They were even angrier that Nate had gone alone, without telling anyone. "You started a war without me," a voice said over the communicator. "Not cool, Nate." "We're coming," said another. "Hold on. Tell the bureaucrats to file their protests. We'll be busy." They were civilians mostly. Freighter captains and miners and colonists, who had decided that paperwork and protocols mattered less than doing the right thing. They were coming from all over human space, bringing whatever ships and supplies they could find. But the fleet would take weeks to arrive. In the meantime, Nate had a different plan. "We're going to teach your people how to fight," he told Kiravet. She stared at him. "We are not warriors. We have never been warriors." "Neither were humans once. We learned." He picked up one of the Drakari weapons they had captured. "You have advantages you're not using. You know this planet. You know every tunnel and valley and mountain. The Drakari don't. You have telepathic bonds that let you communicate without making noise. The Drakari can't intercept thoughts. Your bioluminescence can blind enemies if you know how to use it. These are not weapons. Everything is a weapon if you're creative enough. Nate smiled that dangerous smile. Your people aren't weak, Kiraveth. You just never had a reason to be dangerous. That's a big difference. Weakness is permanent. What you have is just untapped potential. The training began the next day. Nate and Hannah taught the Velrani things they had no words for. Ambush, guerrilla tactics, psychological warfare. They learned to hide in places the Drakari would not think to look. They learned to strike fast and disappear before the enemy could respond. They learned that fear was a weapon as powerful as any gun. Kiraveth was one of the first to master the new skills. Her broken spear was gone, but Hannah gave her a human weapon, a rifle with a stock carved from earth oak. Gift from home, Hannah said. Thought you might want something with heritage. The first mission was a supply raid. 20 Velrani and 2 humans against a Drakari storage depot. The old Kiraveth would have called it suicide. The new Kiraveth called it opportunity. They struck at midnight. The Velrani used their telepathic bonds to coordinate without a sound. They turned off their bioluminescence to become shadows in the darkness. They moved through the depot like ghosts, taking what they needed and planting explosives on what they could not carry. When the Drakari guards finally realized something was wrong, the depot was already burning. No Velrani died that night. 7 Drakari did. More missions followed. A convoy ambushed in the mountain pass, a communications tower destroyed. A group of soldiers led into a trap, using bioluminescent lights as bait. Each victory was small, but each victory mattered. The Drakari began to notice. They had expected the Velrani to be broken by now. They had expected surrender. Instead, they were facing something they had never encountered before. Prey that fought back. Prey that learned. Prey that was no longer prey. They're scared, Hannah reported, after intercepting Drakari communications. They're actually scared. They don't understand what's happening. Good, Nate said. Fear makes people stupid. Fear makes them make mistakes. He stood before a group of Velrani warriors, about 200 now. Some had been farmers before the invasion. Some had been artists, or teachers, or healers. None had been soldiers. All of them were soldiers now. The Drakari think they know what they're dealing with, Nate said. They've conquered 100 worlds. They've crushed species stronger than you, smarter than you, more advanced than you. They think you're just another name to add to their list. He paced in front of them, his injuries mostly healed now thanks to human medicine and his own stubborn refusal to stay down. But they made a mistake. They didn't finish you when they had the chance. They gave you time to learn, time to adapt, time to become something new. He stopped and looked at them with those small, fierce eyes. You're not the species they invaded anymore. You've changed. You've grown teeth. And now you're going to show them what happens when you corner an animal and give it no choice but to fight. The Velrani listened. They understood. Something had shifted in them over the past weeks. The gentleness was still there, but now it was wrapped around something harder. Something that had always been there, waiting. Survival instinct, the will to live, the determination to protect the ones they loved. It turned out the Velrani were not so different from humans after all. They had just needed someone to show them. Kiraveth stood beside Nate as he finished his speech. The warriors dispersed to prepare for the next mission. Tomorrow, they would strike at a Drakari command post. The day after, a weapons storage facility. Each strike brought them closer to something that had seemed impossible just weeks ago. Victory. You've changed them, Kiraveth said quietly. No, Nate shook his head. I just showed them what was already there. The strength was always inside them. They just needed permission to use it. You gave them that permission. Someone had to. He looked at her. Someone gave me permission once too. A long time ago. It's how this works. We carry each other. Hannah approached with a datapad, her face serious. We've got a problem. Drakari High Command is sending reinforcements. A full invasion fleet. 30 warships, including 4 planet crackers. Planet crackers. Ships that could turn an entire world into rubble. They're done playing games, Hannah continued. They're going to glass this planet, rather than keep fighting. The hope that had been building began to crack. When? Nate asked. 6 days, maybe 5. Nate was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled. Then we have 6 days to make them regret ever coming here. Nate, we can't fight a fleet. No, he nodded, but we can make them bleed. We can make this so expensive for them that other species will think twice before letting them through their space. We can turn this planet into a legend. A legend? The place where the Drakari finally met something they couldn't beat. He looked at the Velrani warriors preparing for battle. Even if we lose, we win, because we show the galaxy that standing up matters. Fighting back matters. That some things are worth dying for. Kiraveth placed her hand on his shoulder. We are with you, she said, whatever comes. Nate's communicator crackled again. A new voice, one they had not heard before. Captain Dawson, this is civilian vessel Starlight Horizon. We're entering the system now. We've got 47 ships with us. More are coming. Where do you need us? Hannah's eyes went wide. 47? 47 so far, the voice confirmed. Like I said, more are coming. You didn't think we'd let you have all the fun, did you? Nate started to laugh. It was a sound of pure joy. Welcome to the party, he said. We're just getting started. The humans were coming. And the Drakari had no idea what was about to hit them. The Drakari had conquered 117 worlds. They had defeated the armadas of the Vrix Empire. They had broken the silicon mines of the Calculon Collective. They had made the Galactic Concord look the other way through fear and political pressure. They had never faced anything like this. The human ships came through the void in a ragged fleet that should not have been frightening. There were no warships among them, no battlecruisers or destroyers or carriers. They were civilian vessels, freighters and mining barges, colony transports and cargo haulers, a few personal yachts, and dozens of ships so old they looked ready to fall apart. Against them came the Drakari warfleet, 30 warships bristling with weapons, crewed by veterans of 100 conquests. The math was simple. The Drakari should have won in minutes. The math was wrong. The first freighter, a battered ship called Morning Star, flew directly at the Drakari flagship. The Drakari commander laughed and ordered it destroyed. His weapons fired. The freighter exploded and kept coming. Its burning hulk slammed into the flagship's shields at full speed. The impact knocked out the shield generators on the port side. Before the Drakari could respond, 3 mining barges opened fire with industrial laser cutters modified into weapons. The beams cut through the exposed hull like knives through flesh. The flagship began to burn. What are they doing? The Drakari commander screamed. They're killing themselves. He did not understand. He could not understand. The Drakari conquered because they were willing to sacrifice others. They had never met a species that was willing to sacrifice themselves. The battle raged for hours. Human ships died by the dozens, but they did not retreat. They did not surrender. Every ship that fell took Drakari with it. Every pilot that died did so with weapons firing. They used their vessels as battering rams. They overloaded their engines to create explosions. They fought with a ferocity that made no sense. Why would anyone die for strangers? Why would anyone give their life for a world that was not their home? The Drakari had no answer. And in war, questions without answers become fear. On the surface, Nate watched the battle through a view screen in the command tunnel. Hannah stood beside him, monitoring communications. Around them, Velrani warriors prepared for their own fight. If the Drakari reached the ground, there would be one final battle. Everyone knew it would be the last. "We're losing too many," Hannah said quietly. "Half the fleet is gone." "I know. We can't win this." Nate looked at her. His face was calm. "No, but we can make it count." A voice crackled over the communication system. It was old and female, with the accent of someone from the American South. "This is Betty Hayes, captain of the freighter Lucky Penny. I'm 63 years old, and I've been hauling cargo across human space for 40 years. Never shot at anyone in my life." There was a pause. "Today, that changes. I've got a Drakari cruiser in my sights and a belly full of mining explosives. My husband died on Kepler 7 when the Drakari raided our colony. My daughter's down on that planet you're trying to save." The voice hardened. "I've been waiting a long time for this moment. For all the worlds you've taken. For all the people you've killed. For my husband, who never hurt anyone in his life." The Lucky Penny accelerated toward the Drakari cruiser. "This is for everyone you've ever hurt, you monsters. May God have mercy on your souls, because I sure won't." The explosion was visible from the planet's surface. The cruiser broke in half. Betty Hayes was gone, but she had taken 2,000 Drakari with her. And she was not the only one. Across the battle, human pilots made the same choice. They flew into the heart of the Drakari fleet and gave everything they had. Some were old, their best years behind them. Some were young, with entire lives ahead of them. Some had families, some had no one. All of them decided that this was worth dying for. Kiraveth watched the battle with tears running down her face. She did not understand humans. She did not think she ever would. But she understood sacrifice. She understood love. And she knew, in her hearts, that she was watching something sacred. "Why do they do this?" she asked Nate. "They don't even know us." "Because that's not the point." Nate's voice was thick with emotion. "We don't help people because we know them. We help because they need help. That's the whole reason." The Drakari flagship was burning now. Half the war fleet was gone. The planet crackers, those terrible ships that could destroy worlds, had been priority targets. 2 were debris. 1 was crippled. The last was trying to flee. It did not make it. On the ground, the remaining Drakari forces began their final assault. If they could not burn the planet from space, they would crush it the old-fashioned way. Thousands of soldiers and war machines advanced on the Velrani positions. Nate picked up his weapon. "This is it. Everyone who can fight, with me. Everyone who can't, stay in the tunnels and stay quiet." Kiraveth stood beside him. Her rifle, the one Hannah had given her, felt natural in her hands now. Around them, 500 Velrani warriors formed up. They were joined by the surviving humans, maybe 80 in all. Not even close. But they were not nothing either. "They're going to remember this day," Nate said to the assembled fighters. "Win or lose, they're going to remember. 100 years from now, when the Drakari tell stories to scare their children, they'll talk about the Velrani. They'll talk about the humans. They'll talk about the day they learned that some people can't be conquered." He raised his weapon. "So let's give them something to remember." The battle for the Temple of Ancestors began at sunset. The Drakari came in waves, endless waves, metal and flesh and hate. The defenders met them with fire and determination, and the stubborn refusal to quit that humans had made into an art form. Kiraveth fought beside Nate, just as she had since the beginning. She used her bioluminescence to blind Drakari soldiers. She used her telepathic bond with other Velrani to coordinate attacks. She used everything Nate had taught her. The hours blurred together. She lost track of how many enemies she killed, She lost track of her wounds. All that existed was the next moment, the next enemy, the next breath. Somewhere in the chaos, she saw Hannah go down. A Drakari soldier had gotten behind her lines. Nate screamed something and ran toward her. He killed the soldier with his bare hands, then picked Hannah up and carried her to safety. She was alive, barely. "Keep fighting," she whispered through blood-stained lips. "Don't you dare stop." The Drakari command ship, crippled but still functional, was descending toward the planet. If it landed, it would deploy thousands more soldiers. The battle would be over. The human ships in orbit were almost gone. A handful remained, too damaged to fight, too stubborn to flee. One of them turned toward the command ship. It was a tiny vessel, barely larger than a shuttle. Its pilot was a woman named Grace Carter, 22 years old, fresh out of flight school. She had volunteered for this mission 3 weeks ago. She had not told her parents she was leaving. "This is Grace Carter," she said over the open channel. Her voice was calm. "I've got one shot at this. Tell my mom and dad I love them. Tell them I'm sorry I didn't say goodbye." She aimed her ship at the command vessel's engine core. "But also tell them I wouldn't change anything. This matters. These people matter. What we do here matters." Her ship accelerated. Humanity, screw yeah. The explosion lit up the sky like a second sun. The command ship broke apart. Flaming debris rained down across the battlefield. The Drakari soldiers stopped advancing. They looked up at the burning wreckage of their leaders and saw something they had never seen before. Defeat. The remaining Drakari fought for another hour. Then they began to break. Then they began to flee. By dawn, the battle was over. The Velrani homeworld was saved. Kiraveth stood on the steps of the Temple of Ancestors and watched the sun rise. Around her, wounded humans and Velrani were being tended by medics. The dead were being gathered for proper ceremonies. The living were doing what the living always do, processing the impossible fact that they had survived. Nate sat beside her, exhausted and bloody. Hannah was nearby, bandaged but conscious. They had won. Against all odds, against all reason, they had won. "We did it," Kiravet said. Her voice was hoarse from shouting. "Yeah." Nate looked at the sky where the debris of ships still burned in orbit. "We did. So many died." "Yeah." His voice was quiet. "That's war. That's always war. The good guys don't win because they're better. They win because they're willing to pay the price." He turned to look at her. "The question is whether what we bought was worth it." "I think it was. Your people have a future now. That matters. That means everything." Kiravith thought about Betty Hayes and Grace Carter. She thought about all the humans who had come to die for strangers. "I will never forget them," she said. "Neither will we." Nate put a hand on her shoulder. "That's how we honor them. We remember, and we make sure what they died for was worth it." A new day was beginning. 3 months passed. The fires stopped burning. The bodies were buried. The long work of healing began. The Velrani homeworld would carry its scars forever. Entire cities had been reduced to rubble. Ancient temples had been destroyed. Millions had died. The survivors walked through the wreckage of their civilization and wondered how they would ever rebuild. But they were not alone. Human ships still orbited the planet. They had stayed after the battle, refusing to leave. More arrived every week. Colony ships filled with families who wanted to help. Engineering vessels with crews ready to rebuild. Medical ships with doctors who worked without rest, treating Velrani and human alike. No one had ordered them to stay. No government had approved the mission. No committee had allocated resources. They had simply chosen to be there. That was what Kiraveth still could not understand about humans. They did not need permission to help. They did not need approval or payment or reward. They saw suffering and they responded. It was as natural to them as breathing. She stood on the steps of the Temple of Ancestors, looking out at the plaza where she had first met Nate. Construction equipment moved through the space now. Velrani and human workers labored side by side, clearing rubble and laying the foundations for new buildings. Nate walked up beside her. He looked better than he had during the battle. Most of his wounds had healed, but there were new lines on his face, the kind that came from seeing too much death. Kiraveth recognized them. She had them too. Galactic Concord officially condemned our actions yesterday, he said. They're calling it unauthorized intervention, destabilization of regional security, violation of species sovereignty. What does that mean? It means they're angry we made them look bad. He shrugged. They'll file protests and write reports and hold meetings. Nothing will change. They're too scared to actually do anything to us. Why are they scared? Nate smiled. It was a tired smile, but genuine. Because the galaxy is watching. Every species out there saw what happened here. They saw the Concord do nothing while the Drakari committed genocide. And they saw humans come anyway. Regular people, civilians, flying borrowed ships and fighting against impossible odds. He looked at the workers in the plaza. Some of those species are going to start asking questions. Why didn't the Concord help? Who made the decision that the Velrani were not worth saving? Why do humans seem to care more about strangers than the official government of the galaxy cares about its own members? Those are dangerous questions. Yeah, that's why the Concord is scared. Hannah approached with a datapad. She was walking now, though she still had a limp from her injuries. She had told them she did not care about recovery. She cared about getting back to work. Got the numbers from the relief coordinator, she said. 42 human settlements have sent supplies so far. Another 18 are on the way. Food, medicine, building materials. We've got enough to sustain operations for at least 6 months. And volunteers? Over 3,000 so far. Teachers, engineers, doctors. A lot of them are bringing their families. They want to help rebuild, not just drop off supplies and leave. Kiraveth felt emotion rising in her chest. Why? Why do so many come? They have their own lives, their own homes. Hannah looked at her with those strange human eyes. Because helping people is what we do. It's not complicated. You needed help, we're here, that's it. But the cost, the sacrifice, Betty Hayes, Grace Carter, all the others who died. Yeah, Hannah's voice was soft. We remember them, we honor them, and we make sure their sacrifice meant something by finishing what they started. She handed the datapad to Nate. There's something else. Ambassador from the Thren arrived this morning. They want to talk about a defensive alliance, and the Calyx sent a message expressing interest in establishing direct trade relationships with human space. The Concord is not going to like that. The Concord can file another complaint. Hannah smiled coldly. They had their chance to be the good guys. They chose paperwork over people. Now they get to watch while we build something better. In the weeks that followed, more delegations arrived. Species that had been ignored by the Concord. Species that had been threatened by the Drakari. Species that had simply been watching, waiting to see what would happen. They all wanted the same thing, to talk to the humans. Kiraveth watched these meetings with fascination. The humans did not negotiate like Concord diplomats. They did not speak in careful circles or hide behind protocol. They said what they meant and meant what they said. We're not looking to build an empire, Nate told a delegation from the Veth Collective. We're not interested in controlling anyone. We just think the galaxy could use some people who actually give a damn when bad things happen. But what do you want in return? The delegation asked. Nate thought about it. Friends, I guess. People who'll help us the way we're helping them, not because of treaties or obligations, just because it's the right thing to do. The Veth delegation did not know how to respond. In their experience, everyone wanted something. Everyone had an angle. The idea of help without strings attached was foreign to them. And eventually, they signed an agreement of mutual support. They were not the last. 6 months after the battle, Kiraveth addressed the Galactic Concord. She stood in the Great Chamber, where species from across the galaxy gathered to debate and deliberate, and ultimately do nothing. The same chamber that had declared her world strategically insignificant. "You left us to die," she said. Her voice was calm. She had practiced this speech for weeks. "You decided that our lives were not worth the inconvenience of taking action. You sat in this chamber and voted on whether we deserved to exist." The Concord delegates shifted uncomfortably. Then the humans came. Not your military, not your diplomats. Regular people. Civilians who decided that our suffering mattered more than your politics. They came in broken ships with borrowed weapons, and they fought for us. They died for us. Not because they had to, because they chose to. She paused, letting the silence build. "I did not come here to ask for anything. I did not come here to demand justice, or reparations, or apologies. I came here to tell you what I have learned." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates from 100 species. "There is something in humans that I do not think any of you understand. They came from a world that should have killed them. They crossed the void that should have stopped them. They fought battles they should have lost. And when the galaxy turned its back on the helpless, they did what they have always done." Her voice rose. "They showed up anyway. That is what it means to be human. Not strength, not intelligence, not technology. It is the stubborn, impossible, irrational decision to help people who cannot help themselves, to stand up when no one else will, to be the light in the darkness, even when that light costs everything they have." She pulled the fragment of her ancestral spear from her belt, the shard she had given to Nate months ago. He had returned it to her that morning, wrapped in earth silk. "I was taught that my people were peaceful because we were gentle, that violence was something primitive, something to be evolved beyond. But the humans taught me something different. Peace is not the absence of the capacity for violence. Peace is having that capacity and choosing not to use it. Until you must." She held up the shard. "My spear shattered, my hope was gone. Then a human descended from the sky. He showed me that it is not our weapons that define us. It is our choices. And I choose to stand with the humans. I choose to believe that kindness can be stronger than cruelty, that compassion can be fiercer than hate." She lowered her hand. "You may condemn them. You may pretend that what happened on my world was an aberration, a violation of the order you have built. But you know the truth. You know that when the Drakari came, you did nothing, and the humans did everything." She turned to leave, then stopped. "One more thing. My people have decided to leave the Galactic Concord. We will be joining the Human Alliance instead, as will the Thren, the Calyx, the Veth Collective, 17 species so far, with more expressing interest every day." The chamber erupted in noise, delegates shouting, demanding explanations, threatening consequences. Kiraveth ignored them all. She walked out of the chamber and into the light of an artificial sun. Nate was waiting for her outside, leaning against a pillar with his arms crossed. "How did it go?" he asked. "I told them the truth. They probably did not like that." "No," she smiled. "They did not." They walked together through the Concord station, two figures from different worlds, different species, different histories. Behind them, the old order crumbled. Ahead of them, something new was being born. "What happens now?" Kiraveth asked. Nate shrugged. "We keep going. We help people who need help. We build something better than what came before." He looked at her with those small, warm, stubborn human eyes. "Same thing we've always done." "Even if it is hard? Even if it costs everything?" "Especially then," he smiled. "That's when it matters most." Kiraveth thought about her ancestors, who had built temples and crafted philosophies, and live gentle lives on a peaceful world. She thought about the spear that had passed through 40 generations, now broken forever. She thought about Betty Hayes and Grace Carter and all the humans who had given their lives for strangers. She reached out and took Nate's hand. "Then let us begin," she said. Above them the stars shone cold and ancient and indifferent, but they seemed a little warmer now, because the humans had arrived, and they were not going anywhere.